WNST get to go to New Orleans, but maybe they'll bring some of those beignets up here and some of that delicious food and a pretty good brand of football as well. Ken Trahan is the owner and CEO of CrescentCitySports.com, as well as the sports director at WGSO and the manager and chairman of the board of the Saints Hall of Fame. He knows his way up and down Poydras and up and down Bourbon Street as well. Ken Trahan joins us from New Orleans to talk all things Saints, and it's a pretty good football game here, Ken. I tell you what, our team feels pretty good. Your team having a little bit of a break here. I don't know where the defense is on your side of the ball, but this is a pretty good matchup at 4 o'clock for most of America.
That really is, Nestor. I think it's certainly one of the best matchups in the league this week when you look at the two teams and the quality of the teams and with the way they're playing. The old saying about you don't want your season interrupted when things are going well is certainly applicable to the Saints. They had won 4 in a row and were getting better every week, and then they got their bye. So when you're playing that well, you like to continue playing, and that's been a common theme, but it's not the way the schedule worked out. And, of course, where the Ravens are concerned, just a totally dominant defensive effort at Tennessee last week and really optimal performance in that regard and efficient on offense. So, yep, really good game and looking forward to it. I think it's one of the best matchups this weekend.
Well, I think it's, the obvious part here is where is the Saints offense versus this Ravens defense every time they touch the ball. This is going to be a little bit of a clash of the Titans, two of the best at what they do, facing off, and hope we get better weather than we've had around here lately. But this should be an interesting matchup, one-on-one, to see who's winning these matchups.
Yeah, sure. The oldest matchup in the history of mankind is the unstoppable force against the immovable object, and I think you have that here. New Orleans hitting on all cylinders offensively, and as long as you have number 9 back there, good things are going to happen. The guy's an incredible treasure. He's an unbelievable player, going on 40 years old and doing what he's doing and setting records. And, completed 72% of his passes a year ago to set a record, and right now he's pushing 78%. He's been ridiculously good with no interceptions. Of course, the Ravens' defense is exceptional. It'll be the best defense he's faced and that they faced this year. They have a lot of weapons. New Orleans, they got Mark Ingram back prior to the bye week, and that was huge because he's not only their top runner from scrimmage, but he's also their best pass protector, and he's really good in the receiving game. So having him and Alvin Kamara gives them tremendous juice there. And, of course, on the outside, they got couple of guys emerging, Cameron Meredith, who they traded for, and the rookie in Traquan Smith, who they like a lot, to go along with one of the truly elite players in the league, and Michael Thomas. So they got a lot of weapons on that offense, and, of course, as mentioned, the Ravens' defense, their pass rush last week was phenomenal. Their ability to turn the ball over has been really good. So, yeah, that's the best kind of matchup when you have each team's strength is the one that opposes the other. It makes for the best results, too. And, another interesting aspect, these two teams don't play each other very much. So, but Sean Payton's been in New Orleans since '06, and he's never beaten the Ravens. He's 0-3 against them. So there's that as well.
Yeah, a few of you have brought that up because Breeze has beaten every other team and has been around forever. Look, you're involved, obviously, in the inner workings of Hall of Fames and parades and all the cool stuff that's happened, and we have some good memories down there as well as Joe Flacco a couple years ago. But Breeze and what it represents for the community and what Peyton Manning represents. I've had time around Archie and Eli early in his career, and even I've rubbed elbows with Peyton from time to time. And look, we're Baltimore, they're Indianapolis, and obviously Denver after that with Peyton Manning. But it's impossible to not like Peyton on the backside of this. And I've always wondered what the future is for Peyton Manning and the Manning family, and maybe even Breeze in some sort of tandem 10, 20 years down the line. They got a lot of life left down there. But what the Saints have represented and what Breeze has been a part of in this modern era, seeing it all sort of play out 2 weeks ago was really neat. There's not a whole lot of that Cal Ripken-y sort of wonderful magic left in the game. That was a nice moment for football, I think, and certainly for a guy who has been in an era where everybody's got a scandal and everybody wants a scandal. He's a wonderful story, Drew Brees.
Yeah, he is. Guy's straight as an arrow. I mean, nobody's perfect, look, but he's remarkable the way he's handled his business, the leadership ability that he displays on and off the field, what he's done in the community has been remarkable. His family life's, very emblematic of what everybody would like to have, and it's hard to find any fault with this guy. And the thing about Drew Brees is that he's one of the guys that's kind of done it against all odds. Everybody will always look at what Tom Brady's done, and rightfully so. He's the best that's ever played the game, in my estimation. And people will certainly look at Peyton Manning and and put him in that category. And I know Peyton very well. I'm close friends with the family, and I've watched what he's done, and it was remarkable. But Peyton's 6'6", and Brady's 6'3", 6'4", and then you got everybody talks about how good Aaron Rodgers is, and he's a gazelle, big guy who can move and everything else and throw the ball great. And then there's Drew Brees. He's 6'0" and doesn't have great mobility and doesn't have the big arm. The guy's unreal. He's overcome odds like you wouldn't believe throughout the course of his career, and continues to do that because he's always the guy that's kind of overlooked, right? And I think that's because he doesn't do anything in spectacular fashion. He's not an incredible athlete or runner. He's not this big, tall guy. He's not this guy that throws the ball 80 yards. He just does everything unbelievably well. Most accurate guy I've ever seen, a guy that gets to his third and fourth progressions like nobody else I've ever seen, and he manages not to get sacked. And this is an innate skill to understand pass rush. Certainly some of that credit goes to his offensive line over the years, but a lot of it has to do with him. So he's the kind of guy, I guess what I'm getting at is that you really appreciate him 1,000 times more if you see him all the time, because he's not the flashy kind. He's just a guy that gets it done day in and day out like nobody I've ever seen.
Ken Trahan joining us here. You can find him out on Twitter at Ken Trahan. That's Trahan. He is the owner and CEO of CrescentCitySports.com, also the sports director at WGSO, and working with the Saints Hall of Fame Museum down there in New Orleans, where we all wish we were going this weekend instead of the other way around. I've had enough road games here, Ken, right? I mean, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Nashville. I've woken up with a stiff back here the last 3 weeks from doing the hotel thing. But for the Saints, this off period of time and downtime, one thing that you mentioned about Brees that's incredible for me is his mastery of that offense. And we're seeing the same thing with Brady and Rodgers, which we saw late into the night last weekend as I was burning the candle on both ends of Nashville on my birthday weekend. But with Brees, it's part of it is so automatic and it feels so easy. And he rarely has an awful game, right? He never throws in one of those 4 or 5 pick clunkers. And usually the story in New Orleans is you scored 33 and the other team scored 37 or something weird like that. There aren't a whole lot of shutout sort of oriented weeks for Drew Brees. He always sort of eats a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Brees is that he's had maybe one of those games the whole time he's been in New Orleans for the balance of 13 years. But the thing about Brees that, the one thing that probably keeps him from being mentioned in the top 2 or 3, because he's certainly top 10, if not top 5 of all time, is the fact that he's won just the one Super Bowl. And, his teams have gone 7-9 4 times. They've gone 8-8 a couple of times, which, of course, has nothing to do with him. It has to do with the fact that the Saints have never been a very good defensive football team. It's always been offense, and it's not been because they haven't focused on it. They've drafted enormously on the defensive side of the ball to try to improve that unit, and they just haven't hit in many cases. Now, they found some guys most recently. They've got a defensive end named Marcus Davenport, a first-round pick, who looks like he's going to be a great player. He's 6'6". He can really run and jump, and as a defensive end, he can wreak havoc. He's made at least one big play in every game the last 4 games, and then their nose tackle and number 1 pick a couple years back, Sheldon Rankins, is really emerging and becoming an outstanding player. So they've got some defensive players. And then Marshawn Lattimore, of course, was the best cornerback in the NFL last year as a rookie, and now he's coming off of a concussion, so we don't know if he's going to play this weekend or not. First injury report out tomorrow, but he got concussed friendly fire in their last game against the Redskins. So they've got some better players on defense, but the whole thing about Brees is that their defense been a little bit better. There's no question the Saints would have won more than one championship. So, look, Joe Flacco, as you know, has what he has, largely because the Ravens had really good defenses. And you win championships by being complete teams and being good on both sides of the ball. And the Saints have been one of those teams that have been really good on one side of the ball and not so much on the other side, and that's the only reason Brees doesn't have more. But the litmus test of a great player isn't about how many Super Bowls you win. You can only control what you can control. If that was the litmus test, then somebody forgot to tell Dan Marino. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people you could point to in that realm, but he's a great player. And Joe Flacco's a solid player. He's a good player. He's underrated, I think. And some people blast him for saying he's not as good as the guy that has won the Super Bowls. Bottom line is he's performed well on the biggest stages, and that's what matters.
Well, we had a hell of a night down there in New Orleans a few years back as well.
Yep.
Ken Trahan joining us from New Orleans. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. And, of course, Carl Delmont, one of our great supporters around here, on behalf of There Goes My Hero and swabbing for the Bone Marrow Registry. You can learn all about what they do, buying, selling, or thinking about it, and you need a mortgage. You need the information. They have it for you out of Freedmont.com. Also, our friends at Pizza John's. Got to get down there and get me some pepperoni pizza this week. I've been on the road the last couple of weekends, and I haven't had some Pizza John's, so I'm starting to get a little craving now that I'm into my 50s. They've been doing it for 50 years as well. Down at Back River Neck Road in Essex, we'll be getting down there and getting some pizza pie. And don't forget about the cheesesteaks. And by all means, don't sleep on the ravioli down there at Pizza John's in Essex. Ken Trahan is our guest. He's down in New Orleans. Has been doing the Saints thing for a long, long time there. And talk about things that we could share here amongst the city. Certainly Ben Watson graced us with his presence and his intellect and his class in the time that he was here, short time, and overcame a really heinous injury. But a real credit to the league, and I think, a credit to humanity in a lot of ways, just on views and the way he listens and talks and speaks and thinks and still plays at this age. I wonder what he's doing out there. I wouldn't have bet on him. I'd be honest with you. I'd have bet against him, but I'd have lost again. And he's out there catching passes, and he's going to catch some passes back here in Baltimore this weekend, right?
Yeah, look, first of all, he's as fine a guy as I've ever known that's played the game. When you talk about him, guys like him and Breeze, it doesn't get any better. The guys that cover these people on a day-to-day basis would tell you that because they're as consistent as can be. They're genuine to the core. And I have enormous respect for all those who are genuine, people that live up to what they claim to be. These guys are those guys. And you had Watson, and he did have a terrible injury, and it was a shame. He was coming off of a great year in New Orleans when he departed. And, yeah, he's been a solid guy here. He doesn't have to be the man because they have others, obviously, and they have another tight end in Josh Hill that's caught quite a few passes and played well. But Ben plays smart. He understands what to do. He's a ready, willing, and decent blocker as well. He's unanimously revered by his teammates, and that's important. And for a team that's got championship aspirations and has that capability like New Orleans does, he's a very important piece to the puzzle. So they're happy to have him back. Sean Payton is extremely comfortable with him and thinks the world of him. And he's still got some game, which is good, if he can stay healthy. This is not a case of a guy playing out the string. He takes great care of himself, got himself in terrific shape, and is highly motivated and thinks he has a chance here to be part of a championship team.
Obviously, there have been a couple of opportunities for Sean Payton to leave, get paid, posturing, the bounty gate, all of that has gone on, and here we are again. He's still there. Breeze is still there, still 4-1, and Payton's another guy that, has some enemies around the league as well, but certainly has immense respect as an X's and O's guy and how to draw it up, and also how to lead it and sort of persevere through all of this. I mean, it's a league of perseverance with the Marvin Lewises and the Mike Tomlins and the John Harbaughs and the Bill Belichicks. There is something about keeping a system, and Payton has run that system, and he's going to obviously be in the Saints Hall of Fame, but, also in search of a ring and still a relatively young man here that can still paint more of the portrait of his legacy.
Yeah, look, he's as brilliant an offensive mind as there is in the NFL. Everyone recognizes that. He is incredible offensive mind, and of course he's got the perfect marriage. He and Breeze are tied at the hip. They've came in together, and I wouldn't be surprised they go out together. But they really have a second sense about each other. Their communication is off the charts. His ability to create is amazing to watch. They seem to be a play ahead on so many occasions when they're playing good teams. That was pretty evident the last game they played against Washington, and it happens a lot. And schematically, they're just sharp as can be. They've got a good coaching staff, obviously, but he's the primary guy, and he's highly motivated to prove, that he's an elite coach and that he's deserving of good things. Really got he got, in my estimation, he got a really bad deal with that whole bounty gate garbage. First of all, Paul Tagliabue threw out everything, so what does that tell you? Secondly, with regard to what really happened there, it was ridiculous. It was nothing more than other teams, everybody did. Everybody had pools about the biggest hits and everything else. Everybody, Ravens included. And they got singled out because they denied something initially, and they had a defensive coordinator that was, frankly, rogue in Greg Williams. And, and unfortunately, they paid a price. As I mentioned, after all the investigating was done after the fact, Tagliabue threw out the stuff that pertained to the players completely. There was no validity to it whatsoever. But in the meantime, Peyton paid the most severe price anybody's ever paid, right? A year suspension for a head coach, which was at the prime of his career at a time when New Orleans was coming off of really having its best team ever. Their 2011 team's the best team they ever had. They lost in the last second to San Francisco in an incredible game out in San Francisco. And then, of course, the next week the Giants beat them, and then they go on and win the Super Bowl. Saints murdered the Giants that year by like 40 points. There's no competition. But they really got that taken away from them when that hit them, and it was unfortunate. And he's not a saint, no pun intended. Okay? But
you've used that before.
Fact of the matter is, he got a bum rap, and they did too. And like I said, when they brought in an independent arbitrator, that being the former commissioner Paul Tagliabue, and he did what he did, that was really a slap in the face to Roger Goodell. And, Goodell had it in for them. They don't like each other, either side, and they'll still talk about that, by the way. And, I think that maybe the best example of that, to give you some perspective, is, look, the NFL set up the Saints to play on Monday Night Football against Washington, and they made that decision months and months ahead of time because they knew that based on numbers, that was in all likelihood when Drew Brees was going to become the all-time passing leader in NFL history in terms of yardage. The NFL's not stupid. They do these kind of things all the time. They planned it for that night. They had everybody ready to go. David Baker there with white gloves and a certificate. They stopped the game. Everything was choreographed. And who was not there? Roger Goodell. For the biggest moments you can possibly have.
There's a lot of places he can't go. I'm reading Big Game right now. He's not popular anywhere. No.
He's popular with the owners apparently, and that's about it.
Look at Ray Rice in Baltimore, right?
Sure.
And, New England
Absolutely.
and all that's going on there. There are very few places where he's popular, and I guess that's part of the gig of making $40 million a year and, being, quite frankly, as everyone points to, the guy that takes all the arrows and has to play judge and jury, or somebody has to play judge and jury. Certainly wasn't a good idea for it to be him, but for Peyton and for his legacy, another rock here. You pointed out why when his candidacy comes up for the Hall of Fame, they're going to bring up this and that and the good things and the bad things, but winning a couple more times changes all of that for the likes of Tomlin and Harbaugh and Peyton and these guys that are chasing whatever Belichick is doing at this point, right?
Anybody that wins more than one should be clearly strongly considered for Pro Football Hall of Fame consideration. It's so hard to get one. The NFL is structured unlike any other league to really benefit the lower teams. You have the salary cap issue. You have the draft being as it is. And unlike baseball and unlike basketball, where you can go into the luxury tax, basketball, we got collusion left and right, as you know, with players, the best players wanting to play with the best players, and they just make it happen, and league can't seem to do anything about it. In baseball, you got unbelievable differentials, as you know, with the Orioles between the Yankees' payroll and the Orioles' payroll. So, you
also have differentials in the people making the decisions, too. Right?
Sure, well, that too, of course. I know the Orioles' record this year. I got it. And bottom line is that the incredible disparity in those sports is obvious. But with regard to football, it really is a sport that has it right to try to even the playing field. And that's why it's hard to sustain anything over an extended period of time. So you love or hate the Patriots, to see what they've done for an extended period of time is just remarkable. It's just hard to possibly even fathom that a team could do that over a long period of time and continue to be that excellent. That's really difficult to decipher. Pittsburgh's been a very good franchise, and they've had a hard time matching that. Baltimore has been a very good franchise like that. They've had a hard time maintaining that. The New Orleans franchise got to the NFC Championship game and once under Peyton. They won it all once, and they should have won it in 11 and didn't do it. And they won a playoff game last year and should have been in the NFC Championship, other than a miracle. But bottom line is that they haven't been able to sustain it either. They have those seasons, and they have the 7 and 9s. So it's very difficult in this league to do that. So any coach that can sustain success and win more than one Super Bowl is unquestionably I think, qualified to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Certainly a couple of survivors getting together this week in Harbaugh and Peyton. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by the Boathouse in Canton. I survived my 50th birthday over the weekend and began it over at the Boathouse in Canton with some Portuguese seafood stew. It was unbelievably good and tasty shrimp in there as well. Get on over to the Boathouse in Canton. They also have that shrimp salad that was always made famous there, and it's dog-friendly as well. So bring your pooch down, and as they always say, ship happens at the Boathouse in Canton, and delicious drinks down there. I'm going to get down there for a Bloody Mary brunch with my wife. She's going to have the Bloody Mary. I'm going to have the brunch. Also brought to you by our friends at Strategic Factory, doing the printing, the marketing, the apparel. They do it all under one house now in Owings Mills. I've been telling you all about it. You can learn more at the Ravens game this week. You'll see him there as well at strategicfactory.com to learn more. Ken Trahan is our guest. He's down in New Orleans at Crescent City Sports, as well as at Ken Trahan. That's Trahan out on Twitter. You know, you mentioned the spoils of the league and giving up good players and where the salary cap is and what happens when you pay your quarterback $25 million a year. And somehow Willie Snead falls into the Ravens' lap. And a unique situation in a lot of ways because the Ravens don't usually sign restricteds and they're usually not available in that way. And it's it's usually not a guy like him that can get away. He's been a nice impact player for the Ravens offense, and I think he's going to catch some even bigger balls because he's kind of fearless getting across the middle as well. But I know you know what we're talking about with Willie Snead. A little refresher course for the folks here on what he was about there, because certainly it's off to a nice start here and is a nice piece.
Well, I wrote a nice piece about him today at CrescentCitySports.com, which you can read all about Willie and himself and what happened here, which in many minds is still a mystery.
The curious case exactly of Willie Snead. I got it right here. Correct. At Crescent City Sports.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it really was a strange situation to observe. You know, and it all stems from the fact that he got suspended for 3 games, initially 4 games, and then reduced to 3 for a DUI. He made a big mistake, and the Saints had already traded away Brandon Cooks, you know, a number 1 pick, and they ended up turning that into Ryan Ramczyk, a tremendous right tackle, their best offensive lineman. So it was a good trade, but the reason they did that was they felt comfortable that they had Willie Snead along with Michael Thomas, so they didn't have to worry about having Cooks. And then, of course, Snead got suspended, so that really rankled them, I'm sure. Then he came back and he had a hamstring injury, and he was not right for quite some time and hardly used. He didn't play many snaps, didn't get many targets at all. In fact, he was only targeted 16 times last year in 11 games for the Saints. And he only caught 8 passes for 92 yards and no touchdowns. And that came off of 2 seasons where he was absolutely terrific. You know, in 2015 and 2016, the guy caught 141 passes for nearly 1,900 yards and 7 touchdowns as a slot receiver. He was as good as any in the NFL. And he was top 5 in the league for those 2 years in third down conversions. So he was a critical piece to the puzzle and a guy that Drew Brees loved and depended on. So to see him fall from grace that quickly, especially when he was only 24 years old, was absolutely remarkable to watch. So you can speculate and pontificate about what happened on many fronts, but all the things I think were applicable. I think, you know, number 1, you know, the suspension was something that really troubled him. Number 2, you know, the hamstring injury set him back. Number 3, maybe not in the best of shape. You know, and then as a result, you know, they felt like he wasn't worth investing the money in when Baltimore made the offer to him. So, look, either way, the guy was a really good player here, and he's very good. Bottom line is that, you know, this is a guy that I expected would be good this year. He's got something to prove. He's got 30 catches. He's caught 7 balls last week. That's no surprise. He'll be highly motivated to play this game. He's very well liked. If you go back and look at his exit from New Orleans and a class social media post he made about the Saints and to the Benson family and everybody else and how much he appreciated his time here. Same thing with the coaches and the general manager. So, listen, this was a guy who was extremely well liked, a guy that was respected, and again, that's why I was puzzling as to what happened here with him. Glad to see him doing well in Baltimore. We like him, and happy to see him having success, and it doesn't surprise me at all.
Ken, last thing for you. I mean, as it relates to Michael Thomas, and the Ravens have been trying to find wide receivers, and they find one that's a bit of a cast-off from your farm there. But, wow, I mean, Thomas is what you're looking for with a second-round draft pick. Ozzy's been trying 20 years to do that, to find the 6'3" guy that actually goes out and catches 100 balls. But there's going to have to be a paycheck for him coming soon as well. But as far as the game this week, he's the problem. He's the troublemaker in this. He's the guy that's going to beat you on Sunday if you're the Ravens, I think.
Well, when you play the Saints, you got to account for Thomas and Kamara. I mean, they're two elite players who do elite things. And Kamara will, when Kamara is not on the field, Mark Ingram is, and as I said before, he's a run between the tackles and hurt you guy who gets better with every carry. But he's also their best pass protector, and he's a very good pass receiver. So they don't lose anything. They just give you a different look when Kamara's in the game. But Thomas is an exceptional player. He's strong as can be physically. Strong hands, big catch radius, very tough physically. And, again, he set an NFL record, for the most catches in his first 2 years in the league. Nobody's caught more passes than he did in his first 2 years in the NFL, which says something right there. So, yeah, people have to scheme against him, there's no doubt, and take their chances with the other Saints receivers. Ted Ginn Jr., if he's on the field, he missed the last game. Traquan Smith, their rookie, who I mentioned earlier, 6'3", and big catch radius and can run, and then Cameron Meredith, who they acquired in the trade with the Bears, who was coming off of a serious knee injury, and he's now starting to play like the guy that played very well for Chicago. So they have other weapons. I mentioned the tight ends earlier with Watson and Hill. So and Drew Brees he doesn't play favorites. He'll get the ball to whoever's open. So got to deal with Thomas, make them go somewhere else with the football, because Thomas is always going to be the first option. And take your chances with other people. And then I think the most important thing is if the Ravens can cover well enough, then they don't have to blitz, they'll be in great shape. If they have to blitz, it could be a problem.
Tell me something about the Saints Museum and Hall of Fame, because we've lost that here in Baltimore with our Sports Legends Museum. And, I don't need to tell you, politics, money, civic duty, responsibility, ownership, all that involved. It's not an easy task, but I think it's an important thing for all of us who love sports to get around it. I'm a big fan of all of the cool stuff that adorns the history of the game.
Yeah, started the Saints Hall of Fame back in 1988, so it's the second oldest in the league to Green Bay, and it's been a pleasure to be part of it. I was asked to come in and have an opportunity, and when that opportunity presented itself, I took it and have run with it, and it's been great to build this over a period of time with a great board of directors and working with the franchise to make it what it is today. And when we started this thing with the Saints, they had hardly any success at all. So to see the success they've had since then has been great. But the museum is actually in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, so on game days they have a prominent former player there signing autographs and taking pictures. We'll get 5,000-6,000 people coming through, and during the week, people make appointments to bring groups in and everything else, and they thoroughly enjoy it. The challenge with any museum that's dedicated to something that's still happening is to constantly update it as well as upgrade it. So that's the obvious challenge, and we continue on in that realm. But it's been around since 1988, and so we're over 3 decades and still pushing hard and having fun in the process. And as mentioned, if anybody ever comes down to New Orleans, it's in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, and easy to find, and we'd be glad to have you. Look forward to having you.
Well, all of our Baltimore Colts stuff having been moved out from my childhood and our, all of that, and not going to games in San Diego or St. Louis or maybe Oakland sometime very soon as well. I'm glad the Saints have just survived and done well and thrived and are still a part of this thing, and certainly that your museum's not just an Archie Manning museum anymore. It's full on, and you've got, a rich thing coming down the line with some people you're going to be adorning and adding to that as well through this period of great football. So, hey, man, always good to catch up with you and talk to a fellow sports historian. Keep up the great work down there, and we'll share Chris Pica forever, right, as our friendship.
Yeah, he's a great guy, man. It's my pleasure. Glad to do it anytime, and hope it's a good game this weekend. I fully expect it will be.
Bring me some gumbo or something good, all right? Something that travels, all right?
Nothing
pleasure, fried. It won't try. How about just some okra? Just bring me some of that. Ken Trahan joining us here from New Orleans. You can find him at Ken Trahan, as well as at Crescent City Sports, where he did write about Willie Snead. BuyAToyota.com. Audio Vault's there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. Just go out there, check it out, download it, podcast, and listen when you want, where you want, to what you want. It's the BuyAToyota.com Audio Vault. Big thanks to them. Hey, Maryland Million being run this weekend down at Laurel. I want to say hi, hope. I got to get a Laurel song, though, but I'm going to work on that. Maryland Million this week. Stan Salter's going to be joining us from Maryland Horse Radio as well to preview all of that. Get on down. Some baseball going on as well. You have a cocktail, have a crab cake, bet the ponies, beautiful day. Get on down for the Maryland Million at Laurel, as the coach would say. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.